Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, you're listening to the Technology Equals Equality podcast.
Hey, welcome back to the Technology Equals Equality podcast. I'm your host, Lori Brooks, and this is episode 34. I am super pleased to welcome to the show Chris Hamilton, founder of Sales Tip a Day Consulting, a certified marketing guru, fellow podcaster, and blogger. No matter the industry or size, from entrepreneurs to small business owners or the city of Calgary, Canada, Chris will find ways to improve techniques and increase team productivity. Through numerous years of sales and marketing experience, Chris helps businesses achieve growth with proven results. Today, Chris joins the Technology Equals Equality community to share his entrepreneurial journey. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. My pleasure.
Chris, we would love to know a story of how it is that you once saw the future before you began building out your business and your website as Sales Tip a Day. What did you think you would be doing in the future? Where did you begin?
You know what? I had no idea what I was going to be doing in the future, but I get asked this question quite a bit, actually. Well, actually, in a roundabout way. So I always have to answer it to people to kind of explain how I got to where I am today and potentially where I'm going in the future. So if you go back about 10 years, I ended up I went to work for a software company here in Calgary, up in Canada. And it was a smaller little company in Calgary here that had 4 employees, maybe $250,000 in revenue. And they teetered on the brink of bankruptcy. So what I did was I came in the door and I ended up putting a process in place for their marketing, more the biz dev side of things. But flash forward to about 2.5 years later. We had 27 employees. We had almost $7 million a year in recurring revenue, and really it all started with like $20,000, $30,000 contracts. So we grew that business extremely quick. I burned myself out because I was doing so much work in that company.
I can imagine.
Yeah, that I ended up backing myself out. But here's where it's going with this one is that so many people used to come to me and they go, "How did you do this?" And I would go out for lunch with people. I'd write on a napkin. I'd say, "Here's exactly the steps you need to do," and I'd throw it out to people. And 6-7 months later, a year later, I would have lunch with them again and I'd say, "Where you're at?" And they're we're exactly where we were before. How come? Because we didn't do anything that you said. So it was kind of a light bulb moment. Just boom, it went off, and I said, "You know what? Anytime anyone asks me this, I have to explain to them, you will never get there. You need to embed me in your organization and let me help you grow your business." And that's really kind of what I did for the last 6 years. I worked with various companies and just kind of get them going, get the processes rolling, get their marketing or their sales aligned, and get them moving in the right direction. So that's how I ended up doing this. As I was doing it, though, how I started branding myself with Sales Tip a Day was, truthfully, I got bored sitting around doing nothing, and I thought, if I can't, why should someone have to go through the 25 years I went through to figure this thing out? So I just started posting blog posts up, and really, I didn't expect to have an audience. I didn't expect anything from it, and lo and behold, I got an audience, and I got people that contact me on a consistent basis. Hopefully, that answers that question.
It certainly does, and then some. You're awesome. Because the next question was actually, what were some of the first steps that you took? And so, you really answered that, because what you did was you took your time with your consulting, and then through having built up a business, you went ahead and began creating your blog because you felt like you wanted to go ahead and encourage others and explain what it was and how it is that you got into what you did, to a wider audience, even though you weren't necessarily looking for the audience base. But I want to take it back just a little bit and talk about the first steps that you actually took when you began the company in Calgary, with the brick and mortar. What were some of the first steps you took there prior to even thinking about building a company?
Well, first of all, I got to step back and say, how I decided to go work for myself was, it took me until the time I was like 40-something, 40, I guess, so 48 now, so maybe 40, 41, 42, to realize that I hated working for people. And so that was kind of really what was the first step that made me think about this, was that, I don't like working for people because your life is determined by their actions. And it makes it tough. So what I did was, kind of the first thing I did before I jumped out and started with this kind of software company, I also injected some cash in the company to keep them afloat. I had to get a comfort level, and I think that's one of the biggest things that people have a problem with is kind of getting a comfort level before they go and start doing their own stuff. But some of the first steps I had was, okay, I need to know that there's going to be revenue coming in the door. That's the first thing that most people take a look at. So, and then second step was, do I have something that's going to be of value to people? And then third is, if I've got those two, then I know I could probably make a go of it. I just have to go out and see if people are willing to pay for this sort of thing. So those were the first steps that I took when I decided it was time to work for myself.
I love that. The motivation really came from recognizing your personal feelings towards working for others. And I think that is something that drives a lot of entrepreneurs, but is never really discussed.
Yep.
And I think it's the truth, Chris, because I think it's one of those things that in the back of your mind, you're like, I could be doing this for myself. I could be spending these hours building on something that's going to benefit myself and my family in the end versus working on a business and something that's benefiting someone else in the long run.
Absolutely.
So that's excellent. And again, your answers are awesome, Chris, because the next question I was going to ask are really what are some of the key metrics that you feel a newbie should focus on when they're starting out? And I really think you encapsulated that well with the, taking a look at whether or not there was going to be any sort of revenue streams and whether or not what you were going to be producing or providing was going to be of value to the audience and to your listeners.
Yeah, well, just to talk about that for a couple of seconds, absolutely, revenue, I think, for anyone who's going to start a business is key and critical. And one thing that I see with entrepreneurs is they underestimate how much, or they overestimate, how quickly they're going to get cash coming in the door and how much they're going to be making. So, if you say, I want to be making $100,000 a year, I know I need to sell $200,000 worth of my service or product to make this happen. You better be thinking that, you actually need to sell about $1 million and you need to sell it in like 2 months instead of the 1 month you thought you would. So you have to be realistic about those sort of, metrics that you use as well.
Certainly. No, being realistic is probably one of the harder portions if, in fact, you don't bother to take the time to do the research. And that, I think, is what really catches people up because there's so many different avenues of research that can be performed when starting a business that you can get caught up in, looking at too many different areas and not necessarily taking the time to look at how your budget may be aligned with the time frame that you're looking at to begin producing.
Absolutely.
And I myself, I say this a lot with a lot of my guests. I tend to get caught up in research to a degree where I feel like I just go overboard and then I become a procrastinator and then I'm just staring at ideas like, well, from this thing, and it may be useful, but what if they want this? And I tend to hem and haw over ideas a lot more than I really feel like I should. So do you feel like there is, a minimum or a maximum to the amount of research that a newbie should be performing prior to launching any sort of product or process or business?
Okay, so I'm probably one of the. I'm gonna give you an answer that'll make people cringe, probably. So I have tried. I've come up with concepts for ideas and tried to sell them. I've sold so much what they call vaporware in the software world, so many times, and the reason being is that I just wanted to see if there was actually going to be a market for it. So, there's that. Part of that answer is that, that's as minimum as it gets. I come up with a harebrained idea and I would go sell it. Now, I don't do that anymore. So I'm just going to put that preface out there, right? The flip side to this is, and I'm going to say is I'm not in this world, but I've got other people that, they have the, they try to put something together or research so much to see if it's going to be a minimum viable product that they don't even get anywhere near getting set to launch or getting it going, or they've missed the mark. So to answer your question, is there a minimum or a maximum? There always is a minimum and a maximum, right? I think really what you should do is, and I'm working with a company right now, I'll give you a prime example of this, is what it is they built out a software package for the health and safety industry. And they had a safety consulting business. People came to them and said, hey, can you do this in a software package? And instead of them just saying yes, they said, well, let me go check, right? Let me check with some other clients. What they did was they went out to 5 other clients and they said, is this a problem in the industry? And they said yes. And as soon as they heard or knew that it was a problem, they built it. Then other ones would come to them and say, well, can you do this? Can you do this? And they did the same thing. They went around to about 4 or 5 different people or companies and asked. And, if they were kind of at that like 60, 80%, they knew that there was a problem in the industry. It was below that, they wouldn't actually build it. So, hopefully that answers the question. There's just, do a little bit of research. Understand that there's a need for the product and stuff like that. And just do a little bit of digging. But whatever you do, don't prolong it to a point where you cannot capitalize on it, I guess is the best way to do it.
Definitely. I think that what happens is, like I said, it turns into a procrastination point, and then it's a mute point because you can no longer become profitable with the idea because the time has passed. 60 to 80%, I think, is a really great metric that you had put out there in terms of what they were using as their baseline for when they would launch something, because it really has a lot to do with your own gut and looking at your own market and figuring out, really how you feel as to whether or not this is going to be something that you can push forward. So excellent. How do you feel that technology has assisted you in streamlining the procedures that you've had throughout the years?
Okay, so I'm as old as dirt. So it's, I started back when like computers didn't exist, or they did, but you couldn't access them or anything like that, right? So, and I love technology. I can't say I'm bleeding edge, but I love technology and stuff. One of the things that I think is great is specifically, I always think everyone's selling. That's a role. Everyone's in marketing and selling, if no matter what you do. And you're always trying to push yourself ahead. You're always trying to get your ideas, bought into and everything. One of the things that I like, especially on the selling side or biz dev side, I guess, is, technologies can help streamline processes. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a company over the last couple of years where I kind of had to bring myself in and embed myself. And they had a bunch of employees. And I ended up doing, first of all, email marketing. I would do webinars. I would do what else would I do? I used a system called Call on the Go for making calls, which is awesome. It fits on your iPhone, and you can just kind of push a button, and it'll help kind of auto dial people that you've put into a list. And where it streamlined the process was literally by leveraging email marketing. I was able to get information out to a huge, wider audience at a rate of about 30 times what the other, 150 other people that were in this company were doing. Then on top of it is I would do it was about 20 or 21 times more WebExes or demos, webinars, than anyone else in the organization. And then, of course, when it came to phone calls, it was out of control. So the reason being is that, that helped me streamline a process to get in front of as many people as humanly possible compared to other people. And I think really, if anyone's out there looking for technologies, there's little bits and pieces that you can kind of cobble together to help you use your time way more efficiently. And, another example of this is how's technology assisted in streamlining processes? I live and breathe on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is the most powerful tool that anyone has to them in a business world. And I mean, there's just certain ways. I mean, if you don't know anyone, but someone's in your second connection in your network, it will help you increase your sales success by 2 to 4 times greater than if you just approach this person. So think about this. That would streamline a process to help you get more sales. So yeah, I mean, I'm being long-winded on this, but there's so much technology out there that is just phenomenal that you can use to do way more with your time nowadays.
Certainly. No, the ability to increase your own volume of productivity just through the multiple resources, like you said, but not only that, there's so many free resources, like you said, Chris, that you can piece together in different manners that can really help you do some amazing things in this day and age that weren't around even when I was younger. So
absolutely, there's, you know what, I'll give your guests one that's amazing. It's a CRM system called Contactually, and it is unbelievable what you can do with that. I literally, by using Contactually, I save myself or I gain 1 full month of productivity each month. And if anyone wants to find out how or why, they can just send it to me. I'm not going to go into the details here, but they can reach out to me at chris@salestipaday.com, and I'll show them how it works. I got a video on that.
Awesome, and I'll definitely include a link to that in the show notes page, and I'll have to check that one out myself. I've actually never heard of Contactually. I've heard of a couple of other different CRM systems, but never Contactually, so I will link to that, and I'm interested to check it out myself, so thank you.
You're welcome.
What do you feel prospective entrepreneurs should really take into consideration as one of the most important things they should consider before they take the leap?
You know what? It all comes back to revenue, is how quickly they can get revenue. And truthfully, I really believe, people think they open their door and the revenue starts to come in. And, in most cases, it's not that way.
Right.
You really need to think about, how am I going to bring money in the door? And how quickly I'm going to bring it in. So, I mean, really, whatever you do, just, make sure you got a plan in place and a contingency plan just in case. Right.
Create an A and a B plan and make sure you have some idea as to how that revenue is going to be created, and a decent estimate as to when that cash flow will actually begin.
Absolutely.
Because without those two pieces, it's just a hobby. It's not an income-producing activity in any way, shape, or form. It's just going to be a hobby.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Exactly.
Definitely. So the show is really designed to help entrepreneurs come up with an idea for an innovative company in an industry that they may not have thought of. So, Chris, I would absolutely love the opportunity to be able to help you. If you had a magic wand and could change anything at all in your business, what would it be and why?
Good question. I think one of my biggest problems is probably follow-up. And the reason being is because I get so much going that sometimes things just fall through the cracks. And I guess if I were to look at it is how do I put a process in place to follow up? Now that said, I always like to spin a positive out of things as well. And there's another CRM program I use called Insightly, which basically allows me to create task lists, which I've been using religiously for the last year or so, which has helped me somewhat overcome this problem, just so that I can make notes and put stuff in place in the future for follow-up. So, but I mean, stuff falls through the cracks and I forget things and I feel really bad after the fact when someone reaches out to me and says, "Weren't you supposed to do this?" I'm like, "Oh, geez, yeah, I guess I was. Sorry about that." But that's the, if I could get 100% follow-up, that'd be awesome. I'll probably be at 75 to 80%, and I miss about 20%, I'll say, so.
That is outstanding. I think what we have to do is find some way to get you an admin over there and delegate even more of the the processes and things that you're working on currently.
No, I already have I have an offshore resource that helps me out every day. So it's I think she thinks I'm ADD because I throw so much at her all the time. So it's
it's so funny, Chris. Then in that respect, you just need to delegate more.
That is true. Actually, I do need more time to delegate on that stuff. So.
That's exactly what you got to do. We got to get more off of your plate. Oh, but that's excellent, Chris. Thank you for joining us today. Please share the best way for our listeners to find you.
You know what? Come to my website, salestipaday.com. I got a plethora of interviews with some of the world's greatest authors there. Guys like Brian